Hello and welcome to Moderate Fantasy Violence, a podcast about pop culture and the world around it. I'm Nick.
And I'm Alistair.
And this fortnight it's a rare, possibly one of our first ever actually, it's an all-animation episode, as this time we covered a new Netflix adult animation series, Scavengers Reign, about a group of characters crash landing on an alien planet, and then we'll be covering the biggest movie of the year so far, financially at least. That's Inside Out 2, the Pixar sequel. But before either of those cartoons, Alistair, what else have you done?
Yeah, well, I went to the theatre, and this isn't a theatre show that I went to see in my guise as a reviewer for Everything Theatre. This is a play I went to see in my time off from both theatre writing and consuming content for this podcast and the job that I actually get paid to do, which is much less interesting. I went to see a West End production of The Boys from the Black Stuff. This is a staged version of the classic TV show from 1982. That's on at the Garrick Theatre. The TV show is mainly remembered for the catchphrase of one of the main characters, who's one of the main characters in the play, which is "gives us a job," which has attended some form of infamy as a phrase. But yeah, there's a kind of there's a rich life to this this story. It's set during the Thatcher era, set in 1982, about a group of tarmac layers, people who lay tarmac for roads and car parks. That's the boys who lay the black stuff, hence the title, who are unemployed and basically have to take illegal cash-in-hand jobs on the side because there's just no work in post-industrial Thatcherite Liverpool. And it's very moving. It's really shows the descent of people driven to poverty by the complete lack of work. So if you're interested in something that's political, moving, and emotional, I can strongly recommend this play.
Yeah, no, sounds like it's in your wheelhouse, yeah. Did you watch the show? Are you familiar with it?
I was familiar with the show. I've heard of it before, but I've never actually watched the original Boys from the Black Stuff. It's one of those, I guess, sort of British 80s classics that at some point I should dig up. I think the plot of this differs slightly, but follows the kind of the main arc and the central characters. The original show was sort of 5 episodes each, focusing in on one character and kind of the story of that person, where this is more of a narrative in which several main characters' lives intertwine. The main plot thread is that, they take some illegal work on a building site and then someone dies due to a tragic accident. And then, obviously there's an investigation and the kind of illegal nature of this work comes to bear, especially the fact that the characters could lose their dole payments by working illegally, but obviously they need the dole to survive, but also they need the work because there's just not enough. I mean, it's a sort of damning indictment of the Thatcherite era, how cruel it was to I guess the working class people of Liverpool and other regions. Very, very politically charged. It's, I guess, interesting for the current moment, as we've just elected a Labour government that's going to have to address things like poverty and lack of work as well. So again, it feels very of the moment, even though it's set in the 80s.
Yeah, no, that sounds pretty relevant. It's interesting, Cody, because there are a lot of, well, at least a regular scattering of West End shows based on, fondly remembered movies and TV shows. But normally it's stuff that's a bit more, I guess, broadly popular than The Boys from the Black Stuff, which I'm not sure I'd ever heard of before I started hearing talk about this play. There's a Fawlty Towers play, isn't there? And
there's Only Fools and Horses musical.
Oh,
things like that. I mean, it's interesting to show that we are getting to the point when there are stage versions of TV shows. It goes to show that TV is seen as a genre, in that right, that can move to, I guess, the kind of, I don't know, some people put the theatre on this higher pedestal than other mediums, but it goes to show that either the distinction between mediums is breaking down, or the fact that following this wave of premium TV, people see TV on the same level as theatre. Obviously, a lot of plays end up on as films or TV shows. It happens less the other way around. But now we are seeing more of it. But this is somewhat of a deep cut, although I can imagine it's something that will appeal to a lot of the audience of people who like to go to see West End shows that are about hard-hitting emotional dramas, as opposed to, kind of more comedically entertaining musicals like the Only Fools and Horses musical or things like that.
Well, I mean, sometimes when I hear about the latest film or TV show that they're making a play of, I do think, and you're going to make that into a play? Okay. But this does sound exactly like the sort of thing you could easily make into a play, so fair enough.
Yeah, yeah. If anything, the stage show on the West End really brings the kind of a sense of epic to what is, a very sort of kitchen sink drama. There's kind of the stage is beautifully constructed with these like enormous cranes kind of in the background, casting these like long shadows and things like that. And there's a real sense of the kind of epic landscape of like industrial decay behind these kind of small characters, just like, in their living rooms or on these building sites. It looks pretty impressive because it's like a big West End production, which was a nice change for me, as I've been to so many plays for everything theatre, lots of great shows, but that are kind of in one small room above a pub, when you kind of have to imagine the huge backdrop. Whereas when you go to see something in the West End, you kind of see the kind of epic spectacle of it, even in something that is just kitchen sink drama.
Well, yeah, at least, you've managed to go to a West End show but still find something solid and credible and salt of the earth.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And it is very powerfully hitting, and really shows that, the deindustrialization, how it drove people, to the edge of despair. There's a very sad plot line about one main character, who goes through sort of slow extended breakdown as his inability to find any job. That is first quite comedic, as he goes around just approaching almost everyone he meets, just asking if they can do some kind of job, including random things like being a lollipop person and just random, which at first is quite funny, and then it becomes increasingly depressing and despairing to the point when that character hits rock bottom. It's very moving.
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds very true to what I know of the times.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not necessarily a fun night in the theatre. Yeah, it's moving, it's powerful and things like that. It's sad. If you want something that's uplifting and buoyant, maybe go see Six or something like that, which is good fun, and there's there's lots of cool rock songs that you'll be singing the way home. But this is really powerful and moving, and is one of those things I would recommend everyone who wants to see some great drama get down to the West End to see. I think it's still on for another few weeks. So I have been looking back on Thatcherism through the medium of the stage. Nick, what have you been up to?
Well, I too have been trying to scrimp and save a few pennies by watching Star Trek Discovery Season 5 so that I can cancel Paramount Plus. Yes, we're concluding the journey that began a few episodes back with me watching Sonic 2 and then Knuckles. Watched the final season of Star Trek Discovery. This is I guess now the oldest of the current wave of Star Trek shows, the one that began the small comeback it seems to have had. I say small, it had 4 or 5 shows running. So yeah, Discovery, if nothing else, did successfully spur a pretty substantial comeback. And this is, of course, the one led by Sonic and Martin Green as Michael Burnham, who has risen up from a lowly prisoner on board the Discovery to now being the captain, and in this final season takes the ship out to try and chase down the technology left behind by the progenitors, who, it's heavily implied, created life in our universe, so might well basically be God. And inevitably, with something so tasty on the table, there will be other people who want it for various reasons, and it all comes down to one big showdown at the end. And yes, I've seen all 10 episodes of this, and it was okay, I guess. I covered Season 4 of Star Trek Discovery a few months ago, I think, in this very slot, and said it was actually really good. It was actually surprisingly decent. They actually had a decent sort of emotional story which put the characters, 2 or 3 of the main characters, very tangibly on different sides of a genuinely ambiguous issue, and created some interesting conflict. And this season sadly does not build on that, and instead doesn't really do anything. There's no real disagreement among anyone that they want to get this thing before any of the bad people get it, and they sort of toddle towards it. At no point is there any real conflict between the characters. At no point is there really even a serious threat. There's a bit more action, if you like big serious action scenes with proper combat and proper spaceship battles in your Star Trek, then there's a bit more focus on that, I think. But this sort of high budget action kind of comes at the expense of some of the more interesting nuanced conflicts that was in the last season. So unfortunately going out on a bit of a forgettable year, Discovery. Never mind. That's
a shame that it ends on this weaker note, because I heard good things generally from yourself and others about Season 4. That's the season with the Anomaly, is it? Anomaly?
The Anomaly, yeah.
Yeah. So that one was good, but then sadly they fumbled the ending.
Yeah, I mean, Discovery does its sort of questing towards a big mysterious thing type ending. What is the burn? What is the anomaly? What is the progenitors' technology? They're never happy unless they're going towards some sort of really huge, obtuse, abstract thing. And sometimes you can make that work, and other times it just leads to these stories that seem to have no stakes and are just people sort of wandering around, and then eventually they meet a big special effect. And that's more or less what happened here. It doesn't really help, to be fair. There is an extent to which it isn't their fault. They didn't know this was going to be the final season. If my complaint is, why isn't it building towards a climax for the whole show? Then the answer is because they didn't know it was meant to be that. There's a sort of extra sort of coda bit at the very end of the last episode which attempts to wrap the show up a bit, but it's clearly bolted on to a storyline which was not intended to wrap the show up. So I can't get on them too much about not having a big dramatic wrap-up storyline. Maybe they would have done things differently if they'd known it was the last year, but in terms of what we actually have, it is not the most exciting ending in the world.
Yeah, but I suppose it's still a self-contained series with a plot that should build towards some kind of ending in itself, so it can be reviewed on that basis, and it sounds like on that basis it was disappointing.
It was, yes. As a standalone season, even if not the finale, it wasn't great. The epilogue coda thing it does comprehensively close off the show, I'll give it that. Honestly, it feels almost a bit too reaching out to be conclusive and epic, and they could almost have left it without it, and it would have worked just as well as an ending, but I guess they felt they should try and give some sort of sense of really tying up the entire series in a comprehensive way to give the final season the sense of epic scale that it really didn't have until then.
Do individual characters get their plots wound up, or reach a satisfactory point? I know, remember, like, Tilly obviously being favourite and various others.
Whether by luck or judgment, Saru, who is one of my favourite characters in this show, does actually get a decent sort of ending, or at least there's a moment which represents a big sort of shift in his storyline which you could sort of take as an ending. Everyone else not so much.
That's a shame. Saru is one of the best characters as well, probably one of the better developed, and it's Doug Jones. He's a good actor. Yeah, that's one of the better parts of the show as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this, the show's habit of annoying me by centering every plotline obsessively around Michael Burnham has somewhat retracted, just because, I don't know, maybe it's just less annoying now that she's the captain. Maybe now it just makes sense for her to be the centre of everything. That aside, Burnham herself doesn't get a huge amount to do either.
Yeah, I seem to remember our previous criticism, I think of season 3, was about how in love the show is with Michael Burnham and how great she is as a person, which seemed a bit odd. That she's sort of, wasn't a hugely complex character.
I mean, she's played by a very good actor, but I don't know, it's always the plotting in a way. The way the story always revolves around Michael Burnham in a weirdly consistent way. Everything always comes back to her, and she always has to be the one to do everything, and it's just a bit, I don't know. Especially having now watched, better Star Trek shows like Lower Decks and Strange New Worlds, I do feel like they could have made more effort to build the ensemble of it.
Yeah, I mean, those are good shows when they, really have like a diverse range of characters, which was what people liked about some of the, the classic or older series of Star Trek, the original series, Next Generation, etc. Obviously, there always was a captain who was the main character in every episode. Most of the plotline focused on them, but they did really build up, like a full crew of characters with especially in Next Generation, large range of characters, lots of personalities, lots to get involved with, less focused on one person as the hero.
Yeah, they do bring in Callum Keith Rennie, who I've seen in a few things, I think. I think he was in Battlestar Galactica, actually, as a new member of the Discovery crew, as a sort of slightly grizzled guy with a bit of a past. And he does at least get a story arc, so that's nice. And, he's a decent actor. He makes it more or less work. It's not desperately amazing enough to save the whole season, but he's a decent new character. I would have watched more of him if they'd continued the show. Maybe they'll squeeze him into a spin-off.
Yeah, I mean, they were talking about doing a spin-off about the Black Ops group. Was it like Section 32? 31, yeah.
I think that's going to be a movie, isn't it? They filmed that.
Oh, yeah. Actually, that is coming out.
Yeah, there was a rumour they were going to do a new show about the Starfleet Academy, which is going to be set in the same timeline as Discovery, which could potentially have some of the characters in it, but I don't know. We'll see. They seem a bit less pursuing aggressive Star Trek expansionism than they have done in the past. I believe Discovery and Lower Decks are both finishing this year. Picard finished last year. So as of next year, in terms of shows that are actually current, we'll be down to just Strange New Worlds.
Yeah, there's also the animated one, Star Trek Prodigy, which was written off for tax purposes, but now someone bought it and it's ended up on Netflix. So it's the one thing that's not on Disney+.
Yeah, they've just released the second season of that. I have no idea whether they might or might not do a third, but yeah, it does seem like there's a bit less Star Trek.
I think that was cancelled and then written off for tax purposes, but it was nearly finished, so they ended up getting out anyway. It's one of those bizarre things like that Batman movie, which has Michael Keaton in it, that we'll never see. So yeah, it's just one of the biggest bizarre faces of the modern entertainment industry that this sort of thing happens.
Yeah, the weird period of dissolving films into money. It was a strange time.
Yeah, but overall, I don't know, how would you reflect on Star Trek Discovery as a complete, project? Because I guess it's probably the only Star Trek show you've watched from start to finish?
For a couple more months, yeah. I will soon have watched all of Lower Decks as well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to reflect on it as a whole project in some way because it seemed to keep changing direction or doing something different or shifting its tone. Yeah, there have been sections of it I've really enjoyed, and then sections of it where I've just been a bit sort of, this feels vague and inconsequential and like you're making it up as you go along. I remember enjoying chunks of season 1 with Jason Isaacs. I remember liking some of season 2 and some of season 3 and most of season 4, and then and now very little of season 5. So yeah, it's been a patchy journey.
Yeah, so hit and miss overall. But yeah, there's definitely some bits I really, really enjoyed. Like the latter bit of season 1 was great with the Terran Empire and Admiral Killy and things like that. Jason Isaacs being evil.
I mean, the show's been so shapeless that it's managed to make you, the allegedly more dedicated Star Trek fan, just not bother watching it.
Yeah. I mean, no one's really been like, you really, really have to keep up with like Discovery. Like, man, it's like, it's got so good that you have to be on top of it, considering how much other content there is out there. Yes, even I, like the first season, I dropped off a bit with House of the Dragon, but everyone was really much like, this is great, watch it. Sadly, Discovery never really seemed to recapture the zeitgeist after the first season or two.
No, not really. Yeah, it felt like, if anything, it got a bit overshadowed by basically every other Star Trek show, which seemed to have a bit more momentum.
Yeah, well, people like Lower Decks more and say, like, Lower Decks is really good and funny and things like that. And then Picard is sort of hogged a lot of spotlight by basically being like, remember these actors for the next generation? Well, there's even more of them back in the next season for all your nostalgia needs. Or, people from, like, other Star Trek shows like 7 of 9 and things like that.
Yeah, and Strange New Worlds, which people seem to also genuinely like. So yeah, it's a harsh world up there. It's a tough fight for attention in the Star Trek economy. But that's poor Discovery. It's gone now, and unfortunately I barely care. Never mind.
Well, I'm glad that even though we started reviewing it on this podcast, the final word is also given on this podcast as well. So for our listeners who were interested in what the our complete impression of the show was, there you go.
Ended with a bit of a whimper, to be honest. Never mind.
Next up, this episode, we will be discussing Scavengers Reign, a new animated sci-fi series on Netflix. After encountering a solar flare, the crew of the cargo ship Demeter have to abandon ship to the vibrant and very alien world of Vesta, which they are orbiting. This show follows several bands of survivors as they both thrive and struggle to survive in the beautiful and deadly world of Vesta. When the Demeter comes down from orbit, a scramble to find the surviving crew is triggered. We've watched this complete season on Netflix. Nick, what did you think of it?
Yeah, this was great. I really enjoyed this. I think it was mostly the sort of the world of it, to be honest. The tangible, icky sci-fi of it. The way they seem to have put a lot of force into the aesthetics and the function and the interrelation of the various really weird plants and creatures and planty creatures, as you say, flora and fauna of this planet, and the sort of terrifying experience of like interacting with them. And I thought it was well done as a story as well. I thought they were very much taking their time and moving us slowly through this world. So yeah, the pressure is then very much on the world to live up to it. Unfortunately, I loved the world building in this show. I thought it was great. So thumbs up.
Yeah, it's staggeringly beautiful. To show it's just like really lovingly animated, and all this thought has gone into all the different characters and creatures. Was it Vulture have published an article which is 53 creatures from Scavengers Reign ranked, and the fact there are like 53 individual creatures in 12 20-minute 25-minute episodes, it goes to show how rich and varied the world is. And some of them are very, very strange, and some of them are very dangerous. My favorite thing about this is like the whole ecosystem. Yeah, and like how the characters learn to live in harmony with this. There's so many great scenes when like one character will like pick a flower, crush that flower and scatter the petals, which will trigger some insects to come up from the dirt, which will then lead to them doing something else, which will then trigger a big fungal bloom, which will then burst and release some chemical, and that was the chemical they were trying to get. Most other shows would just have like they scatter the flower and then the goo comes out of the ground and then they use that. Whereas this show shows how a whole chunk of the ecosystem works just for one little bit of plot. So yeah, full marks for imagination.
Well, yeah, I mean, we've praised shows before for having like complex systems within things. And the weird thing about Scavengers Reign is it does have those sort of systems, but rather than being things you recognise and where you can sort of go, oh, right, they're doing that. I sort of get what they're going to do now. This show, it's just them working with these completely alien, completely unreadable plants and stuff where you just can't really tell what's going to happen, and you're just watching them go through this process, waiting to see what's going to happen next, or waiting to see whether this latest creature they've encountered is going to be one of the nice ones, or one of the ones that goes apeshit and tries to kill them, or one that appears nice and then goes apeshit.
Yeah, so much beautiful, design and things like that. And I could just watch these sort of characters wandering through these varied landscapes. There's different terrains they go through. There's a mountainy bit, it's like sort of savanna bit, there's like a water bit. I could really watch that for ages, just them slowly walk across the planet. Although, yeah, I did like how in the final few episodes it did focus down on some core characters and build to a sort of tense and dramatic conclusion. Yeah, with characters getting pathos and all those things that you want. But it took a while for the plot to reveal itself. It was mainly in the second half, but the first half was just sort of beautiful thing I just love to watch anyway, so no complaints there.
Yeah, it was very, I don't know, visceral. Like, there's a lot of unpleasant ways in which the various alien plants and stuff interact with the human body and try and plant themselves into it, or it really, I don't know, in a strange way, really creates this sort of sense of the ecosystem rejecting people just for how weirdly it reacts to humans shoving their way into it. It really builds a vibe. The soundtrack's lovely as well.
Yeah, I really liked how just the opening credits are just some like quiet piano music and things like that. Yeah, and there's some really quite viscerally unpleasant bits, like there's that sort of weird black bean type thing that grows a sort of fungus octopus creature out of people. That was quite dark and disturbing. Yeah, there was like a sort of plant that kind of grabbed DNA or something from people and then sort of birthed weird zombie clones, and the sort of psychic, lizard thing, various other predatory organisms.
That thing that looked like a combination between a snake and a baby, that was the closest this show had, I guess, to a sort of recurring villain. Yeah, that thing was really, really weird. And again, the really sort of, especially the early episodes when they were setting its relationship up with one of the characters, Cayman. Some really manky stuff there. Real sort of borderline satanic stuff. Really like, oh my god, is this the devil? Very, very visceral and unsettling.
Yeah, well, this show is very interested in like biological processes. So everything is kind of like a biological process, like including feeding, how things live in harmony, how people live with harmony, and also like, yeah, how things like exploit and control each other, like crawl under your skin and take control of you, or the fungus that grows inside the robot that takes control of it, and things like that. Yeah, it's like really, about these kind of biological processes. And and then partly how the characters learn to live in harmony with it, the people as they struggle to survive, how they find ways to get food and shelter, and like I say, like do clever things like scatter the petals that lead to the insects, that lead to the fungal bloom, that leads to the goo that they need to cross a river. People, there's a lot of it like these people, stripped to their technology after they abandon their ship, then have to like find a way to live in harmony with nature. I mean, a lot of people have been saying this show is quite solar punk. Amongst the solar punk community, there is some disagreements about whether it's solar punk or not, or what particular shade of solar punk it is. But he's definitely drawing on this kind of like solar punk focus on like a rich and vibrant world full of like life and kind of the complex interplay between living things and biological processes. It's really not, it's one of those sci-fi shows that's got an alien world that you can believe this is like a full, ecosystem.
Yeah, the way everything interacts with everything else is very clever. I also liked the way it kept sort of the human characters moving, like because it's got 12 episodes and a relatively, I don't know as though thin is the right word, but a relatively sort of uncomplicated plot. It can really sort of take its time on unfolding the characters and doing a few scattered flashbacks and having them go through these weird experiences, because there's always a weird plant you can have pop up to put them through some kind of experience to like show their character. I think it does quite a good job of making you feel like you know the characters before horrible things happen to them.
I think the plot is Hemingway-esque in its sparseness, in that, like some shows can do that amount of plot in, half an hour to an hour. They did it over 12 half-an-hour episodes. But it is kind of got this sort of arc trajectory to it. The first episode ends with the Demeter coming down from orbit. Like, say, they crash-landed a while back. Some of the characters have found a way to live in harmony, or at least, like, exist on this, like, very varied and strange planet. And then, the first episode, the event that triggers the rest of the plot is the Demeter itself coming down from orbit and landing, and then various characters moving towards it to either save the people still on board or loot it. So, and that creates like an overall arc plot, which develops with a kind of, shall I say, a Hemingway sparseness, which is a way of saying, I like that it was slow and not a lot happened.
Well, yeah, and there wasn't a huge amount of like exposition or anything. It reached that very sort of beautiful point of, I don't know, connection with the audience where you can sort of tell what the characters are going to do. You have a good feel for them, even though they don't necessarily bang on that much about their personality and their experiences. Yeah, it's doing a lot with very little.
Yeah, and there's just enough to give you like, a sense of the background, how they got here, what the characters deal are, but also you see them, in their current lives, living amongst this vibrant life.
I mean, the thing people say a lot about like streaming shows and especially Netflix shows is that it's all designed to be like second screened. You can watch it without having to actually look at it, or you can watch it whilst half scrolling your phone. I'm not sure that works with this. I think this is good, solid TV that rewards attention.
Yeah, because you'll miss some small detail and things like that, like just a beautiful little plant and flower. I mean, in some ways, it is a show that can be second streamed because there's not a huge amount of plot or characterization. So if you tune out for a few minutes because you're scrolling Instagram, you're not going to miss a huge development in those because they are well signposted. But you will miss a lot of what makes this show interesting, which is the beautiful world. There's just so many little things. Like there's one bit when like someone gets sort of lost in a tangle of kind of giant weeds, and then there's one of the weeds like unfolds, and there's this like little crown of gem things, and then there's like a little guy in there, and he sort of seems to live a whole life, and then closes up again and stuff. And yeah, you kept thinking like, is that a significant moment? Is that something that will link back into the main plot? And like, no, it's just a weird little beautiful moment. Kind of came and went, a moment of poetry in this rather sparse story.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of things like that where something happens to someone and you think, oh, is that a massive moment or is that just a weird thing they saw? And there's the bit where they encounter the healer woman or something in her little hut, which is one of the many quite harrowing sequences in this show. Especially when they go back and do a flashback to show how she got there. And anyway, I feel like spoiling it is a shame. I'm not going to bang on at length about what happens, but it's all very atmospheric.
Yeah, it's very, very beautiful. And like, I like some of the little nods. Like Demeter is a Roman fertility goddess. And it's a very fertile world, which is just quite a little nod and things like that. A few other sort of sci-fi nods in there. I felt some of the bits in the spaceship were kind of 2001. There's a lot of sort of 2001-y vibes with a kind of weird cerebralness. A lot of it reminded me actually of the video game Half-Life, bizarrely, which was again good for coming up with like bizarre alien worlds that have like really weird and diverse alien life form that kind of feel like part of a complete ecosystem, but also very, very different. I did quite like how this show like conveyed, which is something I do really like in sci-fi. Some of the best sci-fi does this. A lot of great sci-fi novels, but also like the film Alien does, is the aliens really are very alien, very different and weird, even though they have their own ecosystem. It's strange, it's different, it works in weird ways. There seems to be a lot of like psychic kind of connections and things link up in ways that may be symbiotic. Maybe there's some kind of Gaia presence or life form, or possibly, it's just a coincidence. There's that sort of thing. There's a lot of life that's clearly very intelligent, but there's nothing we would recognize as civilization. There's none of the indigenous life has built buildings or structures or armies or things like that. But there are various life forms they encounter that clearly have at least human intelligence, or possibly even greater than human intelligence, but they just live a different form of existence. So yeah, it is a sort of study in the sort of small details of science fiction.
Well, yeah, but actually that's one of the things that's interesting about it, isn't it? A lot of sci-fi, whether due to budgetary needs or just to make things more understandable for us, or even because they are actually making some sort of revolutionary point. A lot of sci-fi tends to have forms of life that are quite obviously in a similar vein to life on Earth, and this is one of those shows which impressively seems to create whole new types of life and whole new structures, and everything just doesn't look like it's descended from a thing you get on Earth. It really does just look entirely alien and weird, and achieving that is genuinely impressive.
Yeah, I mean, like Star Trek has the Klingons, who are like, they're like humans, but like kind of more war-y and things like that. And the Vulcans, who are kind of a bit more philosophical and detached. There's the Romulans, who are sort of tricky and crafty. I mean, there's no shade in Star Trek. It does a lot of interesting storylines with these sort of things. And the point of Star Trek is kind of like this whole, we're all not too different from each other. We're all similar, like we're all just people, whether we look different, whether that be black, white, Russian, Chinese, Japanese, or Klingon. That's very much the point of Star Trek. Babylon 5, again, not too different. There's a lot of like, people in makeup and stuff. And there is a lot of sci-fi that, falls in this idea we're all the same. Star Wars, like, yes, there's millions of different species in the Star Wars universe, and they're all basically kind of interact in very similar ways. But this is very much showing alien life is this huge, bridge between it. It's very different, almost like insurmountable chasm between things that are, again, more intelligent than us, but just so different we can barely communicate with them or interact with them.
Well, yeah, it's very much alien life has this sort of terrifying other, and it does create this whole new kind of tension.
Yeah.
Sustaining that over 12 episodes and, actually going deeper into it without ruining it, which is incredibly impressive. There's
something Lovecraftian about how this kind of vast, alien intelligence is so different and weird and is kind of indifferent to our existence. Also, yeah, a lot of tentacles in this as well, to be fair, and strange water creatures. But yeah, there's a lot of like sci-fi references, but done with a fairly like light touch. There's always the tension coming from the fact that like every time they encounter something, is this going to be something beautiful or deadly in a beautiful way, or beautiful in a deadly way?
Well, yeah, and there's also, it always just reminds you how crap and fragile we really are, because when they do kill people, it's often just like, oh shit, yeah, that guy's dead. that happened in a second. Okay, you shouldn't have walked too near that plant. Sometimes it happens in a sort of karmic way, but a lot of the time it is just, you stepped on the wrong twig. Shit happens, buddy.
Yeah, it's a dangerous planet.
It's a very, the state of nature there. Nasty, brutal, and short.
Yeah. There is, again, something quite Hobbesian about this world, but in a good way. The scientist in me did say, like, the big thing, well, they're biologically similar enough to these aliens that they can eat them and live off them and things like that, but they aren't instantly killed by their microbes, which our immune system wouldn't be able to defend against. I feel I do have to make that sort of slightly scientifically pedantic point, but that's really just Captain Pedant logging on for a minute. And it, to be honest, after the first 5 minutes, it didn't detract from my enjoyment of the show, where I just marveled in the kind of creative beauty of the show. Yeah, this kind of like bizarrely solar punk world of people just kind of like making these small little farms and trying to live off strange alien creatures.
Yeah, I have seen, I think, articles going around saying, from an evolutionary perspective, Scavengers Reign doesn't really work. That probably wouldn't happen, but I'm just happy to believe that we're in a world beyond our human concepts of evolution, to be honest. The sense of weird otherness, I feel, more or less covers them.
Yeah, and we don't know what aliens would be like. There's always that phrase, life as we know it. Well, Scavengers Reign is very much life as we don't know it. And that's kind of where the beauty of it comes from. And that's what makes it different from so many sci-fi shows, when it's just like, oh, we've gone to the planet of the war people again. Oh, here's the planet of the commerce people. If you're sick of all that, this shows genuine original imagination. I don't know, in an age of, references and endless irony and redoing of different things. Yeah, the quality of genuine imagination is a rare and beautiful thing.
Yeah, no, I really, really like this. It's, I guess, another step in the small renaissance in, like, adult animation that isn't just comedy that we seem to be having. There seems to be an increasing amount of this, and, good.
Finally, this episode, we'll be discussing Pixar's sequel to Inside Out. That's Inside Out 2. Riley is now 13. She's living in the Bay Area with her new friends, and her emotions are in balance. When she heads to hockey camp with her best friends, she has to deal with friendships falling apart, new friends she wants to impress, and the onset of puberty, which means that new emotions are in her brain, aka headquarters, such as anxiety, embarrassment, envy, and ennui. We've seen this new Disney Pixar film in the cinema. Nick, what did you think of it?
Yeah, I thought this was good fun. I thought my vague memory of the first Inside Out is that it perhaps felt like a bit more of an emotional odyssey. Maybe it definitely made me cry more. I have definite memories of crying in the cinema. But this one still does enough new with it to, make it feel like it justifies its own existence and doesn't feel like a cheap cash-in. The fundamental gimmick of puberty has come to the brain is a strong enough idea to justify making a film. Yeah, I don't know if it quite nails the execution as well as the first one, but there's enough here to make it worth seeing. If you really enjoyed the first one, it's a fun time.
Yeah, I really liked the first one. It could have been my favourite Disney Pixar film they've done since I moved to London. That was the last 15 years. And maybe even my second favourite overall, possibly only beaten by WALL-E, which I did really, really love. This film I thought was really good, and I did really enjoy it, but it wasn't quite as good as the first one. And I feel that's, going to be critical, and I will point out the things that I preferred about the first one, which they didn't do quite so well in this. But I do want to say I thought this worked really well and was a generally enjoyable film. I mean, it has a sort of standard Hollywood plot of the new emotions come in, there's anxiety, and then anxiety displaces joy, the main character and previous dominant emotion, by being able to look after Riley better. And for a while, everyone prefers anxiety. And then joy has to go on a journey. Anxiety goes too far, becomes a villain. And then at the end, they have to come together and learn about the meaning of friendship. And it's, it's kind of accessible, standard Hollywood children's arc plot. But it's about actual emotions in an actual person's head, which adds this, makes it more engaging, more profound in some way. And it's still got that, which is what I really liked about this film.
Well, yeah, there's something very, something that could be very basic and almost trite, almost sort of, I guess what people call sort of Instagram level uplifting about Inside Out, the whole Inside Out concept. But in the first film, at least, it becomes somehow weirdly poetic that joy and sadness are doing these things and having these conflicts. And again, it's sort of all in the execution, even though it is arguably doing a slightly standard Hollywood plot, maybe slightly more so this time. The standard Pixar slickness, it helps. It's just good. It's just well made. It looks amazing. The animation, continues to be great.
Yeah, and there's so many brilliant bits when like walls of memory, these memory spheres just collapse and they roll around, and it's just great to look at. I mean, Pixar's good at pitching stuff for all ages. There's lots of silly things of emotions putting weird faces and like things going on. There's a lot of quite good jokes end up grown-ups. I quite like the sarcasm, which is a literal chasm in the head, or nostalgia turning up. Yeah, I mean, that sort of end up grown-ups and things like that. And there's relatable stuff about parents and things like that. But also there's, what I liked about this is a really basic relatable story, as well as about the emotions of like being like a teenager and like, becoming anxious and going through that early puberty point when you become anxious and, and you change a lot, and you go through that kind of point when you start choosing your own friends rather than the ones that your parents just sort of shunted you together with. And it's a kind of an important milestone that it captures, which I think is well dramatized here. And also, it made me care about ice hockey. Yeah, because most of the plot takes place at hockey camp. I've never been a teenage girl in the Bay Area at hockey camp, but it made me invested in her desire to get on the hockey team, which, I was involved in it, so it worked on that level.
Well, it's standard teen movie stuff, I guess. You want them to succeed and get into the thing that they think will make them happy. And yeah, as you say, it does a good job of sort of using the inside-out structure to dramatise the teenage experience a bit. Like, I watched some of those bits with anxiety and Riley being influenced by anxiety and felt a little bit of sad inner cringe and my stomach tightening up at memories of my own teenage and possibly later than teenage failings.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's hitting something anyway. It's getting to something visceral.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's sort of universally relatable part of the story. Yeah, you don't have to be a teenage girl in the Bay Area hockey camp or the rest of it. We all gone through that period in our life when you change in that and, discover these adult sensations like envy and anxiety, things like that. And it's all relatable, and it's all done in a kind of relatable way. Yeah, that gets you invested in the character, but also makes the story both specific and universal, which is something I've described in the past. This makes for good storytelling. And yeah, as you said, anything Pixar can do, it is good storytelling.
Yeah, I think a lot of the good stuff is towards the beginning in this film. I was really, really enjoying it for the first 20 minutes or so. The bits where you get reacquainted with Riley, you meet some of her friends, and then puberty happens and it just bulldozes the entire of the old headquarters setup. That's all good stuff. And then when the new emotions first appear, all very funny, all very good reveals. So I was having a really good time for the first half hour of this. I think the bit where they get onto the main characters get onto their big quest, which does feel a bit more like they've just sort of gone on a long walk, is perhaps a bit less good.
Yeah, I really liked the early bit when they get the new console and it's kind of super responsive, and there's a bit, like as soon as sadness touches the console, Riley just kind of breaks down into tears, and and as soon as anger touches the new console, she just explodes in rage, and then when it's disgust, she's just like disgusted at herself and the way her body's changing, and like it does actually get across that stage, that early puberty bit of basically like every emotion is super intense, like anger, sadness, it's like driven to the max. And that's a way of like, it's quite a funny, silly scene amongst the emotions in headquarters, but also is dramatizing something that's like completely relatable as a grown-up who's been through that. And hopefully, I hope some kids look at that and helps them understand who they are and like what they're going through to some degree, or at least makes them feel less alone.
Well, yeah, but obviously that's the stuff where this film is really working. There's both the fun on-screen business, and it looks good, and it's funny and silly, and it also, speaks to something external which works, which is, the best parts of these films.
That's what Pixar does really well. I mean, Toy Story is great because we've all imagined what if our toys had a secret life when we turn off the lights and go to bed when we were kids. Did our toys have a secret life of their own? But also adults relate to it on a sort of, the whole growing up and moving on. Toy Story 3, the bits when the toys are passed to, the young child in the household next door is a kind of, walking away from your childhood bit that we can all relate to. That's what makes Pixar good, when it kind of takes stories and things that affect children but make it relatable in a kind of like, oh, we've all been through that way, rather than some of the times when they try to make things feel geared more at adults, such as like Soul, which we discussed in this podcast and didn't like so much. But then again, they made Up, which is about an old person losing their lifelong companion, and that's very relatable. But then again, lots of kids lose grandparents.
Yeah, there was definitely a point where people were gently mocking Pixar for making kids' films, which often seemed more aimed at sobbing adults. And I feel like Up and WALL-E and kind of later Soul were kind of the peak of that, and they've maybe made a bit of effort to move away from it and go back to sort of more kid-centered storytelling, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think Inside Out, the first one, was a good example of a film that is both more of an understandable children's film and still has that Pixar magic of sort of emotional intelligence and a sort of quiet beauty in it.
Yeah. No, absolutely, yeah. There's so many like nice little bits in this that are, yeah, just like very, very relatable. I kind of like when you see inside the heads of the different characters, such as her friend Grace Riley, when she has like fear in the driving seat, where Riley has joy. The dad has anger, and the mum has sadness. Those are interesting little asides. You know, those things that you see. Builds these things in a very very relatable way, and yeah, kind of always brings in these little details and stuff. And there's a lot of stuff like going down into like deep memories and things like that. Things like, oh, that time when like I waved at someone because I thought they were waving at me but waving at someone else. It's like a sort of embarrassing memory that's been repressed and things like that. It's all very relatable.
Another moment of dark relatability, yes, another moment for me to cringe.
Yeah, and the embarrassment emotion that you like goes in for a handshake, or is it a high five, or is it a fist bump? Oh no, that's like, yeah, again, very relatable, very cringe.
Yeah. So again, there's enough here that's, emotionally sincere and feels like actual human storytelling, not just cash in or not just them repeating themselves, that I think it still works. It doesn't feel like a complete cynical event. It's just, I'm not sure it's quite as bulletproof as a story as the first one was.
Yeah, I felt the first one achieved this kind of level of like profound beauty that this one just doesn't get, and I mean it's still a good film, and I do want to say that, but I just feel the first one was so good. I mean, the first one builds to. I mean, I'm just going to drop some fairly broad spoilers for both Inside Out 1 and Inside Out 2. So this is your chance to run. So anyway, you've had your warning. So yeah, the first one builds to that moment when there's the core memories, and when Riley makes a core memory that is both happy and sad, which resolves the core tension of the plot between the characters of joy and sadness. But also it's a really, really profound statement that's made to in a way that's emotionally accessible to children, which is that like, memories can be happy and sad at the same time, and that's okay. And when that came out, when that memory rolls out and you see and you realize what they've done in the first film, I was really like, wow, that is so simple but so profound. And this film has something similar, which is Riley has beliefs, which I quite like. Her memories make these beliefs about her, like she's a good person, she's a good friend, she's brave. And then the core personality formed by these beliefs is ripped out by anxiety and replaced by a different one. Yeah, that's all based around like I'm not good enough and things like that. Something a lot of teenagers, I'm sure, have felt. And then the main characters, you say, go on this like plot. Instead of putting the original core personality back, they form a new one of all the emotions coming together, which is very much the Hollywood plot line of all the people come together and they learn to coexist and live happily ever after. And it is all very Hollywood and it works well, but I just feel the moment of forming the new personality based on all Riley's emotions, although it works, it doesn't have the profound beauty of the first film, of that simple, very moving statement of a memory can be sad and happy at the same time. And that's what this film didn't have, why I didn't like as much as the first one.
Well, yeah, I was definitely, for the most parts, enjoying this film. I think for a lot of it, the Riley stuff, the sort of external stuff, was almost more compelling than the internal stuff, which is, especially after, as I say, you get past the first half hour or so. But yeah, I was still carried along with it. But yeah, I was definitely merely feeling a bit of a prickle around my eyes rather than weeping buckets like I did for the first one.
Yeah, but it's still good and moving in that way. And things like that. And it's, it does dramatize that age in your life. Like I say, when you start developing your own friends and sort of stepping out of your own world, the early puberty moment, which captures very well. I mean, like Pixar's good at doing these like coming of age moments, like Inside Out. The first one obviously captured an earlier stage in life. We really like Turning Red, which was, another puberty metaphor, but done in a slightly different way. They are good at that sort of thing, but I did like the story, about losing friends and gaining new ones and moving on with life. That was good. And I felt this story focused on Riley maybe a bit more. The last shot of the film was of her, and I think it opened with her as well, rather than with the emotions.
Well, I think especially if they do keep making these, they could do a third one, I guess, if they can find the right life milestone to hit. Then she's unavoidably going to be pretty central to it, I guess. It's very much what's next for her. The emotions almost can't change that much.
Yeah. It's crucial that in this film that, it does feel like not just like a pointless sequel. That like you can always have Riley go on the next stage of her life and have like another emotional moment. So, which is why this film feels like a justifiable sequel after the first one. I feel, I guess, the next major milestone is Riley gets a boyfriend or a girlfriend, in whatever in this, because they've gone through that early puberty bit. In this, Riley has like crushes, but they're on fictional characters or celebrities, people who are kind of perfect and you can never really have a proper relationship with, and they exist in this kind of perfect space or this kind of social construction of them that goes beyond who they really are. And then the next step is actually, having, romantic and sexual relationships with other human beings in a way that's or more of a equal footing, at least in the kind of platonic ideals that exist in the minds of early teens. I don't know if they're going to go that far. Maybe after Turning Red had stuff about girls having periods and getting bras as teenagers, and the internet collectively lost its shit over it. It means they're never going to touch anything that is that much into the kind of puberty again. Or maybe it'll be much like, well, we need new emotions and some other way to shake it up. But that would make that third film very much like the second, and I doubt they're literally going to have horniness turn up. But maybe they'll find some way to do. I mean, if they can do anything, they can find some way to make that accessible.
The horde has survived. It's a massive rhino.
A massive rhino. I guess you'd have Desire, I suppose.
Probably something like that, yeah. Probably Desire rather than the Horn.
The Horn, maybe, things like that. I feel there's a spoof version in this, in which, like, Saturday Night Live version, in which the Horn shows up and basically means...
The Horn shows up and says, all right, lads, ready to go upstairs and make some CORRR memories.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh. So, yeah.
Bleak. Anyway.
There are things I'm not sure I should say running through a hot mic. There's things I feel I shouldn't say on a hot mic that are running through my head right now, which probably reflects badly on me. But I'm sorry, internet, you're gonna have to leave that to your imagination where this joke goes next. But
yeah, that's probably enough sex chat about the children's film. In all seriousness.
No, in all seriousness, I feel the one salient point is that is kind of the next thing. But also, yeah, you can have Riley goes to high school, Riley goes to college, Riley joins the cast of Euphoria is probably not what we want to see.
Probably not. I mean, I don't know. I feel like since it's a film and not a TV show, you probably want to hit something fairly, big and epic in scale in the same way as, the puberty thing did feel that substantial. So yes, it would have to be something, I think, big to justify making it of a film. Unless you're just going to, accept that you're just going to ship one of these out every couple of years, which would be a shame.
Yeah. I mean, it's, like I say, it's a justifiable sequel.
So far. Yes.
So far, yeah. But yeah, who knows what they do next. I imagine with a lot of Pixar, it will come down to, like, do we have, like, a good story and a good creative team who feel they can execute it well. I guess this has been, I think, the most profitable film of the year so far, which is probably the strongest indicator they'll make more of it. I believe I don't have the actual figures to hand, but after what has generally been a lackluster year at the box office, other than June 2, this has, like, really cleaned up. I think people are expecting big blockbusters from Despicable Me 4, which just makes me feel depressed and sad.
Yeah, we're probably not going to cover that one, lads, sorry.
No, because I don't think I could critically appraise that movie without just giving it a real kicking. I just do not like those films. Anyway, but I know the Pixar juggernaut continues to roll on. They've moved on from the days when everything was an unparalleled masterpiece, when it went from, like, the Toy Story films to, like, Monsters, Inc. to Finding Nemo to up to The Incredibles, when it was, like, everyone is, like, a new entry in the history of animated film, or a new just entry in the history of film, period. Those days are behind them, but it still means they can still churn out probably some of the best stuff that's this year. Wouldn't surprise me if this makes the top 5 at the end of the year. Did enjoy it a lot.
Yeah, we'll see. It's definitely a decent contender so far. Okay, and that was Modern Fantasy Violence for this fortnight. Thank you very much for listening. As ever, if you've particularly enjoyed this experience, then why not go to our website at modernfantasyviolence.com and read all the bonus content you can fit into your schedule. And then after that, why not go and leave us a nice 5-star review? Thank you.
You can find more from us on social media. You can search for Moderate Fantasy Violence on Twitter, Blue Sky, or Facebook, and you will find us there. And you can find out more about what we've been watching in between what we're watching or reading for the podcast. You can also find more from me on Instagram, Twitter, and Blue Sky by searching for Alistair Ball. You can find more of my writing at redtrainblog.com and my theatre reviews at Everything Theatre.
And you can find more from me at nickbryan.com, as well as Nick and me on Twitter and nickbryan.com on Instagram and Nick Bryan on various other apps, including Blue Sky and Threads and all of those. And yes, you can also come back next episode and join us for our latest scintillating podcast, in which we cover Spaceman, a recent film starring Adam Sandler finally getting shot into space, and Peacemaker Tries Hard, the new comic series about recent TV star Peacemaker by Kyle Starks and Steve Pugh. Join us in 2 weeks for that. Until then, thank you very much. Goodbye.
Bye. Laboratory time?
Yep, can do. See you in a second.
Time for another biological process.
Sure.